We have another hard hitting edition of the Revealing Truth Search with another all star panel. Let me welcome to the stage the law offices of Andrew Myers, one and only attorney Andrew Myers, his friend from Spokane, an attorney that has followed this case, Kevin. And then we have the people of the hour, the lady herself, Miss Ann Taylor, and none other than Brian Koberger. Let's see what these folks have to say about the issues that are at hand in the case today. So, Andrew, I'd like to start with you. In light of the situation that we are now experiencing with Brian Koberger taking the plea deal, and you hear Bill Thompson get up there and recite a distorted version of the PCA that not only did not add anything to the already known so-called BS evidence in this case, but actually his statements even watered down some of the evidence that we thought they had against Brian Koberger. Have you seen anything in your mind as an attorney that's definitive that would have solidified in your mind Brian Koberger's guilt at this point?
I mean, it's horrible. People have these terms, pro-burgers and defenders and guilters. I never put myself in any of those categories. As an attorney, I tried to tell my viewers all the way along that I respect the presumption of innocence. And I never thought, from what we saw, and I know about the balaclava and the purchase of the knife and, you know, the car driving around, I never saw anything that really, nailed it beyond all reasonable doubt.
Interesting. What about you, Mr. Kevin? I've heard forever now from the mainstream morons, their minions on YouTube, and a literal army of brainwashed guilters that there was going to be so much evidence that hadn't been revealed to implicate Brian Koberger's guilt that it would be a tidal wave that would overcome us. Did you ever see any of this so-called unknown evidence in your mind that solidified this for you?
First stood up, it seemed to indicate that there would be some new information not available to the public, but I really didn't hear any.
I agree with you, Kevin. I didn't hear anything new, but it also gets me to thinking and really contemplating, how to move forward in this thing. But I guess, Andrew, this is something that we're all kind of questioning. In the plea agreement, it seems like Brian Koberger gave up all rights to appeals. So that would seem to be the end of the entire case for Koberger, wouldn't it? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
One of the terms of the plea agreement is that Mr. Koberger waives all right to appeal or to bring a petition to reduce the sentence or any right of appeal. Okay, that's in there. His signature is on that document.
Yeah, well, I mean, I get that too, but you would think with all the intricacies of the law that, there would be something that would open the door. Maybe you could ask Kevin, because he's an attorney up there in Spokane. He's a lot closer to Idaho, maybe even more familiar with, some of the loopholes in Idaho law. If he has any ideas of, how this could still play out in Koberger's favor.
What's the chance that some kind of an argument can be made down the road and there would be some kind of an appeal or other challenge to all of this?
The only potential that I would ever have seen, for grounds for him to be able to collaterally attack would be a case in which there was some sort of new evidence that suggested he didn't do it.
Wow. Now that is big news to me. And you know what? Let's bring in Brian Koberger here, because we would have to believe that the evidence, the new evidence that would prove innocent, would have to come from the massive piles of discovery. Now, Brian, let me ask you, did Ann Taylor make it clear to you that she was unable to get through the mountainous piles of discovery in this case?
No.
Interesting. Ann, let me bring you in on this. Hearing Brian say that, I mean, what would be your response to him?
When I first met you, I was very candid with you about the size of discovery and that our team had not looked at it all.
Wow, I'd like to say that was a huge bombshell, but we all know it wasn't because you've screamed from the rooftops in court that you haven't been able to get through that mountain of discovery. But not to put words in your mouth. I mean, obviously, you were telling him back then you hadn't had a chance to review all the discovery, but now that this thing's progressed in time, 2.5 years as of this date, right now, have you had a chance to review all the discovery?
Well, I'm here to tell you now that we haven't reviewed all of the discovery.
So let me just gather my thoughts here. If I'm hearing, Andrew and Kevin correctly as attorneys, that the only way this thing is going to be able to be opened back up is with new evidence that proves guilt, with new evidence that proves innocence, not guilt. And really the best way to find that new evidence is in that mountain of discovery that has been sealed from us. And then listening to you, Ann, you haven't been able to go through all the discovery as a defense team. So that tells me that us as the public, once the gag order is released and we're able to get all of that discovery that y'all weren't able to completely go through, we go through it and we find evidence that proves Kohberger didn't do this, we can get it opened back up and get a free man released. Kohberger, is that something you want us as a community of fellow Americans to do?
Yes.
Well, then, folks, there's only one thing left to do then, and I think you already know what that is.
I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Like you, be strong to hold the powers of the sun. Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And very interesting interview there. I put the link in the description of this video to that interview that Andrew Myers had done with Kevin there. And I thought it was very interesting, and hope you don't mind me using some clips from that, Andrew. But I've always considered you the only open-minded attorney in this case. So I definitely wanted to highlight that. But after listening to that conversation and taking into consideration everything that we know about this case, it is imperative for us to take the evidence that has been hidden from us that will be released, because we will not stand for it to continue to be sealed. So once it's released, we've got to go through it with a fine-tooth comb. We come across evidence that Brian Kohberger is not guilty of this crime, we bring it forward, and they can absolutely get the case reopened. There you have it, folks. Now, I am not remiss of the fact that Brian Kohberger got up there and he admitted guilt. It is quite possible he could have played some role in this. However, at this point, all the evidence that I look at says he did not. In fact, the evidence that I look at says that it's impossible for things to have happened in this case the way they said it happened. And based on the evidence I've seen, it's impossible for Kohberger's car to get from the King Road residence to Blaine in Idaho. It's impossible without going past the camera. So I need that camera footage. Y'all need to release that as soon as possible so we can go through, because if we don't see his car on there, then there is no way that he was able to physically do that. And I'm sure there's many other things we can look at in this. Now, I've done a lot more research. I know everybody's worried about where Brian Kohberger's going after this. I've done a lot more research into the 18207 and what that actually entails. Now, I listen to these former inmates on YouTube discuss how, oh no, this is how it works. And I'm sure that is how it works for 90%, 99% of the inmates out there. However, this is not a typical case. And it didn't have a typical person come in to play prosecutor at the end on the other cases that I hear these inmates talking about. And obviously they haven't studied Idaho Code 18207, but you can bet Hurwitz did, because he kept bringing it up in his filings over and over and over. And when you go to 18207 and it triggers a psychological evaluation by the state's expert, Well, I hate to tell these inmates this, but when they go to the evaluation part of the prison, he will absolutely do that. That is part of it. He'll go into an evaluation part of the prison for 30 to 60 days. However, they're not going to be evaluating Koberger psychologically at their evaluation prison. He's already had his psychological evaluation done by the defense and by the state. And if you dive in closer to the actual rules of the administration in the evaluation prison, it'll tell you in there that the final decision is passed on to the attorney general. Actually, it says the assistant attorney general, which we know that a lot of the prosecutors from the prosecution team came from the attorney general's office. You can bet Brian Koberger, once he is through the evaluation portion of the prison, will not be going to the Idaho Maximum Security Institution. And I tell you what, it's kind of interesting as I do listen to these former convicts talk about their experiences and what they feel like is going to happen. There's this one guy, his name's Pablo. What's the dude's name? Pablo. Anyway, his name's Pablo, and he's been doing a couple of videos on the situations in prison. And if you were going to listen to anybody, I think that would be the guy to listen to, because he has a really good personality and he breaks things down. I like that guy. But from everything I've looked at, there's no worries. Once Koberger gets through the evaluation portion of the prison, he will not be going to the Idaho Maximum Security Institution. That's already been agreed upon. So he'll be sitting in a plush place waiting for us, apparently, to go through the discovery and figure out what really happened in this case. And that's exactly what we're going to do. And there's so many areas that we can focus on, but I think the areas that we need to focus on is like I told you in the video yesterday, because when Bill Thompson got up in court and he went through his abbreviated facts of the case, I believe he let us in on a lot of areas of the case where they didn't have anything definitive. In fact, it was all speculation by the state. We're going to listen to another portion of that because I'm going to break that thing down over several videos. But here's just one more portion of it where I think we can really dive in hard on what Bill Thompson was trying to express to the world. Let's go.
The state's evidence would indicate that beginning July 9th of 2022, Mr. Koberger's phone began connecting to a cell tower that serves the area of the 1122 King Road residence in Moscow, Idaho. Now, I will acknowledge for the court and all present that there are many residences in that area. It's a dense population of mostly college-related occupants. Between July 9th of 2022 and November 7th, the defendant's phone connected to that particular tower during late night, early morning hours, 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., on approximately 23 times. Now, I will acknowledge also, we do not have evidence that the defendant had direct contact with 1122 or with residents of 1122, but we can put his phone in that area on those times.
You have got to be freaking kidding me. This entire time, we have said that, and he's only talking about one tower. He didn't even mention we got him on several towers. He's just talking about one tower that covers the area of the King Road residence. And he admits that we do not have any evidence, zero, that connects Brian Koberger to the victims or ever being at the victim's home. All we can do is say he was on a tower, and there's many residences in that area, we'll have to admit. All this time, I've listened to these minions out there and these mainstream morons talk about how they've pinpointed Brian Koberger at being at 1122 King Road 23 times within 100 meters. You just heard Bill Thompson finally tell the truth. They have no evidence other than he was on the tower. He could have been anywhere in there. So there is no evidence that Koberger was ever near the King Road residence, ever. The only evidence that Brian Koberger was ever near the King Road residence was on the night of the atrocity, and it was blurry photos of a vehicle driving around. That's it. And then there's that miraculous DNA on the knife sheath in the house. That's how you connected him there, was that. There's never been any phone data ever put in Kohberger near the house. And we have listened to this for 2.5 years from these mainstream morons, and in unbelievably ridiculous detail from these minions out there, talking about it over and over and over. We talked about it. Kohberger was so close, his Wi-Fi touched Kaylee's Wi-Fi. I mean, it was all a lie. Where is the evidence in this case? As Bill Thompson gets up and starts talking about the strongest evidence in this case, which is Kohberger actually ever even being near the house, he admits there's no evidence. We don't have any evidence to back it up. We don't have any evidence. All we can say is, the phone tower said he was in that area. That phone tower covers a broad area. He could have been anywhere in there. There's many houses in that area. What are you not telling us, Bill Thompson? This is my point to all of this. Bill Thompson never, ever suggested that this was a Ted Bundy incel incident. The state has never alleged that. The state has never alleged a motive in any way. Everything that you have heard from the beginning of this case, where they reference incel, Ted Bundy, BGK, all that crap, that was all made up by the minds of the many so-called psychological experts that all say the same thing. Well, this was a sexually motivated crime.
That there is no evidence there was any sexual component or sexual assault on any of the victims. I want to make that clear so there's no speculation.
Good grief. We've heard from Bricado 1,000 times in his myriad of everything about this crime is sexual. We've heard from, so many of these morons. And they can't even ever put Brian Kohberger anywhere near the house before the crime, during the crime. And more importantly, he's going to lie. I'm going to tell you right now, this is a lie. I know, because I've looked through the case files and I know exactly where they were going to claim Brian Kohberger was the next morning. And it wasn't at the King Road residence, but yet he's going to sit there and he's going to lie this fact, but he's going to lie by acting like he doesn't know. Give me a break.
Later that morning, this Sunday, the 13th of November of 2022, Mr. Kohberger's phone returned to the area of King Road. We don't know exactly what he did, but it returned to that area. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning. He was there for about 10 minutes and then returned to his Pullman residence.
Say it ain't so, Bill, because when we go to the defense's objection to the state's self-authenticating records, and we see on number 55, Washington Trust bank records for Mr. Kohberger. This disclosure contains Washington Trust bank records for Mr. Kohberger. There is an Excel spreadsheet of transactions and PDG documents of images of Mr. Kohberger in his car at the ATM on the morning of 11/13/22. That's what he was doing in Moscow. You know it, you knew it, and you just lied in court on the record. So, no, I don't believe much of anything in this case. The more I continue to break down everything in this case, the more it leads me to my final conclusions. Listening to the attorneys talk, diving into the law, listening to everything that I've heard Ann Taylor state throughout this case, that she hasn't been able to go through the thousands and thousands of tips in this case. She hasn't been able to actually go through the mountainous pile of discovery. Listening to the way that they forced Brian Kohberger to plead for this thing without giving any information. If they truly believe Kohberger was guilty of this, they would have stipulated that he give some type of detail that would prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And that was obviously not even in the realm of what we heard. Now, I'm not remiss in that on the sentencing hearing, maybe they will make Kohberger get up and say something. If he says something that satisfies everybody's mind that he truly was the guilty party in this, then so be it. Unless that happens, though, we can all assume everything that we've been assuming. And we can also assume this: with all the cards that were stacked against Brian Kohberger going into this trial, with all of the leaks, all of the motions that were lost, which were ridiculous, and with all the attached media coverage that was about to come out, well, we can sit back now and determine if the only way to open the case back up is to find find proof of innocence, then it would have been a wise strategy to release everything in this case and take that discovery that was impossible for the defense to go over, release it to the public where they know we're all going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and let us handle it from there. I believe that is the final move by the defense. It was, here, y'all take it, y'all find it, because we are at a dead end with the way the state is handling this case. It's up to y'all now. And by y'all, I mean all of us. But let me know in the comment section if you believe that is the right strategy and that is something that the defense really wants us to do, is dive in, find the real evidence in this case and bring it to the light. If you think that's what we should all do, then let me know. And if you do agree, then I implore every truth seeker out there to do exactly what I'm going to do, and that is continue to dive in, look at every detail in this case, and we know where to look. And if we find proof of innocence, bring it forward and bring this thing back to justice. If we find proof of guilt, we're going to bring that forward as well and put an end to this thing. From everything I've seen, the more likely scenario is to find the proof of innocence. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Post your comments, your thoughts, your criticisms. And until next time, by the way, hope y'all had a wonderful and safe holiday weekend on this wonderful Independence Day weekend. And until next time, Pavarotti's out.
Fly away. It's the first time of today.